Jung's dark psychology, the side of him you must never trigger, is not just a warning. It's a doorway into the part of a man's psyche he keeps hidden even from himself. Every man carries a shadow, a collection of unspoken desires, suppressed emotions, unresolved wounds, and instincts he refuses to acknowledge. And Carl Jung didn't just study this shadow, he mapped it. He understood its dangers, its power, and the consequences of awakening it before a man is ready. So today, I want you to listen very closely, because this is not about manipulation, games, or control. This is about understanding a psychological reality that shapes how men love, detach, chase, fear, and sometimes destroy the very connection they crave the most. When a woman triggers the shadow of a man who has never faced himself, she doesn't awaken passion, she awakens chaos. And that's why Jung called it the forbidden side of male psychology. Because once the shadow is activated, a man becomes unpredictable, reactive, emotionally volatile, defensive, and sometimes even obsessed with a woman who pulled something out of him he didn't even know he was carrying. Jung's dark psychology, the side of him you must never trigger, becomes more than a concept. It becomes a warning to protect your emotional peace. But here's the part most women never realize. It's not your beauty, your silence, your presence, or your absence that awakens his shadow. It's what you reflect back to him. You see, a woman who is emotionally grounded, self-respecting, and deeply self-aware forces a man to confront the parts of himself he thought he could hide forever. You don't trigger his shadow by being difficult. You trigger it by being real, by being calm, by being strong, by being someone who won't shrink just to make him comfortable. And this is where his unconscious starts shifting. When your presence mirrors his unresolved wounds, his ego cracks. And when his ego cracks, his shadow slips out. Jung believed that the shadow appears when a man's idealized self-image collapses. In simple words, when he realizes he is not who he pretended to be, not as confident as he thought, not as emotionally strong as he projected, not as secure as he wanted you to believe. And when a woman makes him feel exposed even without saying a word, his shadow activates. Jung's dark psychology, the side of him you must never trigger, becomes a reality unfolding right in front of you. He starts acting differently, cold one minute, intense the next, detached one day, obsessed the next, avoidant but watching you closely, silent but analyzing every move you make. This is not because he doesn't care. This is because he cares in a way he doesn't know how to control. You awakened a part of him that was asleep for years. And here's where it gets even deeper. A man's shadow is not the dark, aggressive monster people think it is. Sometimes his shadow is his vulnerability. Sometimes it's his abandonment wounds. Sometimes it's his fear of not being enough. Sometimes it's his deep desire for emotional connection that he suppresses because he thinks love makes him weak. Sometimes it's the anger he hides. Sometimes it's the jealousy he denies. And sometimes it's the longing he's ashamed to feel. When a woman brings out these emotions, he can't process them consciously. So instead of communicating, he reacts. He pulls away. He avoids. He tests you. He becomes distant, but emotionally tied. Silent, but energetically attached. Cold, but still watching you. Because the shadow is awake. And the worst part, he doesn't know what to do with it. And this is exactly why Jung said, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. A man who hasn't faced himself will always act out his shadow instead of healing it. And if you stay close to him during this phase, you will become the target of his projections. This is the danger Jung warned women about. Because if a man hasn't confronted his shadow, it will control him. And if it controls him, he will try to control you. And this is why the shadow is something you must never awaken unless he's emotionally mature, self-aware, grounded, and ready to face himself. A mature man's shadow is integrated, not suppressed. When his shadow is integrated, he becomes calm, protective, emotionally strong, and deeply connected. But a man with a suppressed shadow becomes controlling, inconsistent, unpredictable, distant, and overwhelmed. And here's the emotional punch. Many women think his distance means he doesn't love them. That's not always true. Often, he pulls away because loving you forces him to face himself, and he's not ready. But something powerful happens when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop reacting, stop overgiving, and stop trying to fix his emotional confusion. Your silence shows him the truth he never wanted to face, that his wounds are his responsibility, not yours. And this is where the dynamic shifts completely. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop feeding his ego. When you stop over-communicating, you stop soothing his insecurities. When you stop trying to prove your worth, you stop enabling his emotional immaturity. And suddenly, the mirror breaks. He is left alone with his shadow, the side of him you must never trigger unless he is ready. Because once awakened, it demands transformation. And here's where your power begins. Your silence doesn't punish him, it exposes him. Your distance doesn't hurt him, it reveals him. Your calmness doesn't confuse him, it shakes him. Because for the first time, he sees himself without distraction. Jung said the shadow is not evil, it is simply the parts of ourselves we refuse to accept. So when you stop explaining yourself, your presence makes him confront his deepest denial, that he is not as strong, secure, or emotionally awakened as he believed. You become the catalyst not by force, but by embodiment. You awaken him not by demanding, but by being. Your energy becomes the mirror that reflects his truth. And men who are not ready for self-awareness often respond with fear, disguised as distance. But men who are ready respond with growth, disguised as silence. Because yes, silence is not always avoidance. Sometimes silence is transformation. And when a man starts transforming, something incredible happens. He stops resisting the shadow and starts integrating it. This is when he becomes grounded, emotionally mature, emotionally available, capable of deep love, capable of intimacy, capable of vulnerability without fear, capable of connection without control, capable of loving you from a place of strength instead of insecurity. This is why a woman's silence becomes powerful. Because silence is not absence, it is alignment. Silence is not distance, it is protection. Silence is not coldness, it is emotional clarity. And when a man begins losing the version of you that used to overgive, over-explain, over-care, or over-invest, the shadow inside him wakes up fully. And for the first time in his life, he realizes he must rise, or he will lose you. Jung's dark psychology, the side of him you must never trigger, becomes a prophecy inside him. A realization that he must evolve into the man who can stand next to a woman like you. Not the man who hides behind ego. Not the man who runs from his emotions. Not the man who collapses under pressure. Not the man who loves from fear instead of strength. But the man whose inner world is as stable as he pretends it is. The man who is no longer threatened by your strength. The man who no longer fears your silence. The man who can love from his healed self, not his wounded self. And the most powerful part, when you stop trying to awaken his potential, he finally awakens himself. And that is the moment transformation becomes permanent. That is the moment a man stops running. That is the moment he stops avoiding. That is the moment he stops hiding. Because when a man finally meets his shadow, instead of running from it, he becomes someone capable of deep, secure, honest, grounded love. And that is the only version of him who is safe for your heart. If this opened your eyes, if this made you think deeper, if this made you understand male psychology in a new way, then remember, the feminine doesn't awaken a man by force. She awakens him by energy. And the moment she stops explaining, she becomes irresistible. For more transformative content like this, for more Jungian psychology, feminine energy breakdowns, and deep emotional insights, visit the channel for the next video. If this message spoke to you, stay for the next video. Your transformation has already begun.